Right, In Focus continues for you now. The Human Settlements Department aims to collaborate with traditional leaders to identify disaster-resilient areas for housing projects. Minister Mmamoloko Kubayi says the collaboration aims to identify safe stands to protect people from potential disasters. She joins us for a little bit of a broader conversation on the priorities of the department. Minister, good to have you. Thank you very much for coming on this evening. Maybe we can start there. I mean, the intention of the partnership itself is because you have identified the role played by traditional leaders in the allocation of land, but proactively you want to help them do a proper allocation or a better land allocation system. What led to that particular decision?
Good evening, Thabo, and good evening to the viewers of Newzroom. We started conversations with the National House of Traditional Leaders, where we started to talk about how we can play a role or in collaborative and actively in partnership between our department and also the National House, which led then to an engagement in the province of Limpopo, where we were invited by the Provincial House of Traditional Leaders to have a conversation about how we can partner there. The issue of cutting of sites and the partnership is one of the areas. We've agreed firstly to support the traditional houses, for example, in Limpopo, and we will work with other provinces of ensuring that there are social amenities in communities. The first issue is around, you find that traditional leaders report that in their communities, there are no community halls, and they're not able to engage with their communities on various issues. And they've requested us to support in this as part of human settlements work. You know that we've moved from housing to human settlements. So we started with that, with Limpopo providing resources for the MEC Makama to be able to fulfill with this. Yeah. Then we said with the
what kind of resources are you providing? Sorry, Minister. What kind of support? Is this financial support? Is this non-financial support?
It is.
What does it look
financial
like?
Support.
Right.
It's financial support in terms of allocation of budgets. So what we did in the last financial year, we added about 200 million to Limpopo Department of Human Settlements. Amongst other things, we said they must be able to build social amenities in the communities. We were there last month in the Limpopo province to give progress. For example, you'd understand in the rural areas, children will not have places to play. So we are building combi courts for children to be able to have places to have recreational facilities in those. We are also building community halls for communities to be able to have. And we believe that these community halls can also act, for example, where gymnastics can be done by young people in that area. So it will have multifaceted responsibilities or things that can be done with those. So that's some of the things that we're looking at in fulfilling our responsibility as human settlements, but also trying to close the gap between the rural areas and the urban areas, especially paying attention to rural housing program that we are doing as human settlements. And then the next phase is the one that you talked about. What we looked at, Thabo, is that when you look at disasters, they affect many communities and more in terms of rural areas. Whether you go to Limpopo, you go to Eastern Cape, you go to KwaZulu-Natal, you'd find that communities live in land that has been allocated by traditional leaders. Now, traditional leaders would not know that this area is dolomitic. Traditional leaders would not know that if I say, this is the site that I cut for you, it's on the flat lines. So what we took as a decision, and this was endorsed in the main MAC, is that we will work together with traditional leaders, provide technical support in terms of ensuring that we do geomapping in these communities. One, it will be proactive mechanisms to give the maps to the traditional leaders to say, this is your land, it starts here to there for this traditional council. And then with this tribal authority that you have, this is where it's suitable for land, for human settlements that would be able to cut for people. And these areas are not suitable for human settlements. Therefore, don't put people to be able to stay. We believe that this will go a long way in proactively preventing people literally drowning in terms of rivers, people actually falling. We do note that there's quite a lot of dolomitic areas. If you look at Limpopo, there have been mines, and would want to make sure that within those mining communities, traditional leaders don't cut sites where in 5 years' time, the sinkholes will appear and people literally disappear.
What will be the incentive for the traditional leaders to do that? I mean, ordinarily, yes, of course, the safety of your people, the safety of the people that you govern over should be your incentive. But if you have pressure of people looking for land, you look at the geo map, what is it that is going to incentivize you to say, no, but don't build on this line, build here?
Look, Tab, I can tell you, with our engagement that we started in Limpopo, they were actually very happy to say it helps them to plan better. They do believe that this is way of government coming to partner with them and assisting them in the areas where they do not have capacity nor resources to do. So it has been positive feedback. I've received letters from some of the traditional leaders in KwaZulu-Natal to say, we've seen our people get into floods, gets affected in flood, and we literally become hopeless as traditional leaders because this is what communities will look up to us. So we would want to ensure that proactively we prevent this, but we can engage our communities better. So the incentive is, yes, definitely being able to be seen as leaders, leading properly and providing guidance, but partnering with government to ensure that they better the lives of the communities that they serve.
Yeah. How else are you then going to, I suppose, isolate these particular areas? Because, for example, we hear in some instances, I'm sure you also know this, of human settlement areas where they will build a fence or they'll build a wall to say people don't build beyond this point. But people break that fence and they go ahead and build anyway.
Actually, if you look at traditional leaders' areas, Tabu, you find quite a lot of law and order. So we do find that where traditional leaders have said that people do not stay, people don't go and evade. Evasion of land, we see it a lot in semi-urban and urban areas. In rural communities, what we see, there is a lot of respect for traditional leaders, but engagements in terms of how we do not have that in preference. I guess when we get to that point where if it's an area where people no longer respect their traditional leader, we'll be able to look at how we deal with it. But in our experience and in the engagement, we found that in many areas that we've had to engage with, there hasn't been violation of people actually cutting and putting themselves without their traditional authority.
Yeah.
And those are the areas that we want to first work with. And then we can go to the difficult ones later, but showcase the model that it works and it actually can save life. Because we do believe that we've got to move away from a point of being reactive in dealing with disasters, but being proactive in the engagements with communities.
So the trade exchange, if you like, or the collaborative intervention includes you bringing technical support. Do you just come into the area, report yourself to the chief in charge and say, this is what we're coming to do? Or do they give you a piece of land and say, do the work here and give us the details in terms of mapping?
We're going to pilot the model. We started to engage with Limpopo traditional leaders. So what we'll do, we've agreed to work through the provincial House of Traditional Leaders, and then we'll start with area by area. So what we'll do, we'll bring traditional leaders together in an area. For example, I will be in Mmamoloko in December, engaging with traditional leaders. The team is already starting to work on that to prepare for it. We'll go in there, meet with all the traditional leaders, explain in detail with them, then introduce the team that will work with them so that they know that this have authority of the minister they can work with, so that if there are issues and concerns, they can come back to us with the MEC to say, Minister, we are not happy about this. So there will be a process that we do together with the Provincial House of Traditional Leaders. When we go to KZN, we'll engage with those traditional leaders. Again, we'll do it with the Provincial House of Traditional Leaders. But as we do that, we will be feedbacking to the National House of Traditional Leaders to say, these are the commitment as a department we've made. This is how far we've gone, because regularly we go back to them to give them feedback on our commitments and what we have been. So we would want to see this implemented because it has been our commitment to partner. And they will also report to SALGA as part of the partners that we work with. They have asked for a report so that they are able to work with their councillors, and also councillors can be involved in the process, because in those wards, other areas are councillors' wards, others will be traditional leaders' representatives.
Now, you made, of course, this announcement during your second meeting of the MINMEC in this 7th administration, where, amongst other things, you were also outlining, from my own counting, is probably 5 priorities: prioritizing vulnerable groups in housing, title deed restoration program, housing of military veterans, emergency housing, and an update on the Human Settlements White Paper. Let's stay with that 5th one, update on the Human Settlements White Paper. You, of course, published the White Paper last year in December, and there's been a consultation process. If I'm correct, you've postponed it twice, but there is, at this particular point, still a feeling from organizations like the Center for Affordable Housing Finance in Africa, the Housing Forum, that you need to go back to the drawing board, not just do minor edits, but actually sit down and rewrite this whole entire document. What is your feeling?
We've published the document, yes, in December. We extended twice and it closed in March the 15th. After that, we had a reference group where we met with NGOs and academia. They gave us feedback in terms of the quality of the document, but also the issues that they had worked on. We then put together a task team that involved academia and NGOs, representatives together with government. They then went chapter by chapter to ensure that the areas of concerns that have been raised can be covered. For example, the center that Prof. Madonsela is leading in Stellenbosch, for example, were feeling that we did not adequately cover the issue of homelessness. They assisted us in terms of their input to ensure that we can cover that. So there's quite a lot of changes that we've had to do in the original white paper to what we have now. So our consultation was not a whitewash, was not a superficial one, was really intense. Finally, what we did, it was not even the departmental officials that worked. I asked Dr. Marwala, who's one of my advisors and a former academia, to lead a team that would ensure that the drafting of the document has actually ensured that all the issues have been taken care of. So it was a team of 5 people who were academics as well, but also who had governance experience, who have worked in governance. For example, Dr. Nqulunga, who's the head for center in UJ, but who is the former head of PICAS in government, who actually was leading policy unit that dealt with governance. So you had quite capable people who went through, who understood the policy process, who had to work through the document and ensure that it's of quality. What we took to MINMEC, I can assure South Africans, is of a high quality, address the issues. Yes, we will not be able to address everything in a policy document because other things are going to be addressed in legislation, Human Settlement Act. Others are going to be addressed in what we called Housing Code or Human Settlement Code as it gets changed. So that's what I want to say, Thabo. I'm confident we are going to cabinet now. I'm hoping that we'll get this approved before the end of the year when cabinet rises so that we can start the work. And next year we start with the act change because there's a lot of things that are pending for us to be able to deal with on the basis of the act and housing. Code. One of them is the increase of 3,500 as the limit. People are saying you can't continue to do that because the food basket is even above that. So you've got to change that. That's why it's important for us to pass this policy and pass legislation that will respond to the challenges of today.
All right. So, I mean, you're saying it addresses that whole question around this document having done extensive research, data analysis with some advocacy groups. They are saying they want broadly, systematically, starting with a review of the findings and the recommendation of the past decade of research, evaluations, studies that are available. The white paper needs to pull the intelligence together, review the evidence, distill key strategic directions moving forward. Saying if we don't do that, then we are just really putting a bandage on top of a crack.
I don't think so. We've really done a lot of work. There's been a lot of work that has been done over time in terms of the work in the department. So a data analysis and some of the issues, Thabo, we must say to the public is that policy was changed by courts because we took long to amend the policy. There remained gaps in terms of lacuna in some of the issues, and we are led by cause in determining what needs to be done. So we've got to close those gaps. We can't continue to consult perpetually without addressing the needs. We can't continue to be in drafting space without addressing the needs. Because while we are drafting perpetually, while we are consulting perpetually, South Africans remain affected.
Yes.
So that's what we've got to take into consideration. At some point, you can't consult for it. If we look at it, this drafting, by the time we release it, we are going for December. It's a full year in terms of work. When you look at the requirement of white papers, literally consultation in 30 days, and you already concluded within 3 months. We've done extensive work for almost a year in this process.
Now, with the kind of background that you already articulate in this particular paper, weak fiscal position, rapid urbanization, the precarious socioeconomic profile of the people of South Africa, what do you see as your role? Others calling for you to play a more enabling role than being the sole provider of housing in the country?
No, definitely. We've never said that we are the sole provider of the housing in terms of the country. Remember, the constitutional mandate says that we must create an enabling environment. That's why we talk about multifaceted approach. Firstly, you would have heard me talk about the issue of disclosure in terms of your gap market being worried, because we have an obligation to ensure that we create a conducive environment for South Africans who are working to be able to afford a shelter. So that's our role. It's not us to provide a shelter, but create policies and legislation that ensures that can happen. Yeah. Secondly, there's opportunities for public-private partnerships in terms of providing for housing in the country. And that's why the white paper is critical, because it will enable, it changes where we are or where we come from into the future. It looks at those things. It addresses issues of alternative building technologies that when 1996 we did the white paper did not exist. It addresses issues of disasters or climate change, as we know today, that it's actually we have to build in terms of climate resilient environment. It talks to the issues of inclusivity in responding to building sustainable communities, not only where people are providing shelter, but ensuring that they have safer communities, safer spaces. It's linked to housing, not only housing, but it's linked to schools, it's linked to economic opportunities. So the white paper acknowledges that we've traveled, and these are the things that we've got to look into between today and also in the future.
Yeah. So the insufficiency in terms of articulation in the white paper, Minister, comes in the form of how people, for example, will access affordable materials and contractors. I mean, asking that, as you're saying, well, people will build their own houses. How are you, in the space of limited fiscal resources, are you going to assist the people in that particular area?
Look, Chab, I think the first issue about those who continue to criticize is that they've seen the first draft. They've not seen the final draft. I think that's the first thing. So they need to take cognizance that we've been able to receive inputs and therefore allow us to conclude, having taken all the inputs into consideration and processed it. On the issue of material, we do acknowledge that the manufacturing space in the country is a problem in terms of affordability of material for those who build for us in the sector. And that is the space, for example, that we've got to partner with DTIC, because they are the responsible department for manufacturing space. We do believe, for example, in Minmec, one of the conversations that we're having is that why are we price takers instead of price setters? Now, you've got to do that within the law, that you are able to set the issues. So there will be high-level identification of certain areas that we need to cover, and the implementation of those areas will go into detail and perhaps even include the other departments, sister departments, being the ones that responds to what we are calling for. So the white paper can be in detail as if it's an implementation document. It's not an implementation document, it's a policy document. It gives an overall high-level strategic areas that needs to be covered. Out of those, then you develop an implementation plan. You amend the act, and then you amend the housing code. Housing code in the human settlements space is seen as, for example, an implementation area. If you look at other areas, we did when I was in science and technology, we did a white paper. Out of that white paper, then we did a decathlon plan, which is an implementation plan. So what we will do out of this, we'll develop an implementation plan per area. And therefore, that will respond in detail in how it's going to be done, where it is going to be done, by who. Then that becomes an implementation.
Now, the other question is, of course, around how incremental planning is going to be done, but two, tenure arrangements are going to be established. I had a conversation the other day with the Minister of Rural Development and Land Reform, and I believe there is some kind of collaborative work that you are doing together around the area of tenure reform. But how is this arrangement going to be made outside of the formally proclaimed areas?
Look, firstly, it's around the issue of land that belongs to the state being transferred to the human settlement for human settlements purposes, including agricultural land that is meant for human settlements. You would hear that we talk about traditional leaders areas. So we're responding to the issue of land tenure in traditional communities so that we work collaboratively. We do not intend to take the rights of traditional leaders, but acknowledge them as stakeholders in terms of working. Land tenure in terms of ensuring that we can give the rightful owners of the properties who are built by the state title deeds for them to own that land together with the houses that they have, including those that have been given the land or stayed in the land in the past decade, including at the time the houses that used to belong to the apartheid government. We want to give them because people were renting. Some of these areas we continue to work. For example, one of the issues that we looked at in Minmek was that if we are to do waivers of Spluma to communities that have been living for more than 20 years in the areas and be able to give them title deeds, we'll be able to release about 800 title deeds in the country. So it's those things that we're looking at, not only at a policy level with the white paper, but already some of the areas we're already implementing.
Now, questions have been asked, I'm sure, every time you present your budget speech on housing for military veterans. At some point, there was a call for an audit of the veterans and who are they, who's eligible, and so on and so forth. You've set this as one of your priorities, housing for military veterans. How is this going to be approached?
Look, Thabo, the first issue is that we do not do verification as the Department of Human Settlement, who is the legitimate military veteran or not. That is done by the Department of Military Veterans, DMV. And what they do, once they've done that, they provide us with a list. So what we have agreed as Minmek is that we've got to implement and provide those that have been verified with us, because we're sitting with almost 4,000 that we have been given by military veterans department to say we must provide houses for. And that's why we're going to provide houses for. What we were not happy, especially myself as the national minister, was not happy about the pace that provinces are moving in terms of military veterans houses, but also in terms of prioritizing them. So we've requested them that they must up the pace. And one of the conclusions was that all the provinces, the MECs, must have a meeting with military veterans and explain what we provide as Department of Human Settlements, how we provide them, but also share the list that we have so that jointly we can monitor each other on the program. It's very critical because this is one of the benefits that military veterans are expecting from us as government, and continue to, especially those former liberation war veterans, military veterans, feel that they are neglected and they're not taken care of. And we do believe that as human settlements, we have an obligation towards the state and the people of South Africa to meet our responsibility and to meet our obligation to providing for these military veterans. So that's why we took it as a priority that it must be done urgently and responded to.
And finally, of course, with the natural disasters that we are seeing, with hijacked buildings creating fires and so on and so forth, creating a lot of emergencies. How are you strengthening your approach to the emergency housing program? Because these are temporary housing arrangements for relief for people in urban or rural areas who find themselves in emergency situations, and there's a lot of that happening now.
Yeah, the first thing that we did at Minmek was to approve the framework of how we're going to work together as the three spheres of government, defining the role of local government in providing for this response, what is it that they need to do, what provinces need to do, and also what national to do. Also, the issues of threshold. For example, if there are 15 and less, the MEC has to respond to and provide that. We will ring-fence some of the budgets in terms of issuing that. Secondly, we agreed in terms of the areas of intervention. For example, the voucher system, where it's partially damaged or it's a window that has been damaged, that it can be provided so that we don't take long in responding. Two, it's the TRUs, where we need temporary residential units. The quality of them and the specs must be adhered to by all provinces so that there's uniformity. We don't have the situations like we said, we saw previously what SIU outcried. And then lastly, it's in terms of permanent solution. How do we ensure that there is a linkage between what we provide in temporary and also what we provide in long term? So the last one that I forgot there is the issue of what we call TIA, temporary emergency accommodation. For example, in eThekwini, we know it's prone for disasters. What we have done through the municipality, we've acquired a property that will be utilized as a safe, a temporary accommodation, so that we don't have people going into halls when disasters happen, and would want to escalate that to all the provinces, especially Eastern Cape, Western Cape, and KwaZulu-Natal, because their frequency in terms of disasters has become more prone and frequency more high. So we'd want to see that happening and the intervention happening in that manner. So we do believe that with this approach, we'll be able to ensure that we do have a quicker response. The other area which councillors raised on behalf, Salga raised on behalf of councillors, was that many councillors don't know how to work. So we agreed that we've got to work through the district disaster centers. We have officials that are placed there in the disaster situation. They get data from that and they're able to activate responses. And we are saying to everybody, let's work through those disaster frameworks so that we do not create parallel structures to what is already existing as disaster infrastructure that is there in the country.
Minister, we appreciate your time. Let's leave it there for tonight. Thank you for your indulgence. That's the Human Settlements Minister there, Mmamoloko Kubayi.